as some of you probably know, or when I had a chance to play some college baseball at SIU Edwardsville is where I finished up at. And after my senior year as an undrafted player, I attended some tryout camps and with various organizations, mostly by invitation. And actually on the same day in June of 1982, was offered contracts by the Minnesota Twins and the St. Louis Cardinals. So being a lifelong Cardinal fan, and because I had a bunch of red stuff already from playing at SIU, I signed with the Cardinals. I went over and a guy named Paul Fawkes signed me at Busch Stadium right before a game, said I needed to leave for Gastonia, North Carolina the next day. And I said, now wait a minute, hold on here just a minute. I said, I know I didn't get drafted, but I think we should talk about my bonus. And he said, let me, he goes, I might have something for you. So he left the room for a while, and I think this ought to be good, because undrafted, I was a senior, I had no bargaining power at all. And he came back with a brand new pair of red spikes. There were the shiniest spikes I'd ever seen.
Your size?
10. And which would have been all fine and good, but I wore size 12. And I told Mr. Fox, I said, hey, those are great. I said, but those aren't my size. He goes, that's the only size we have. So make it work. So I took the size 10 shoes and packed my bags and drove to Gastonia, North Carolina, which is a beautiful town with a less than beautiful baseball field. It was in a dry county, which not that had anything to do with my trip, but it was a dry county. There would be less than 100 people come to our games, and we not only had the worst record in the South Atlantic League, but we had the worst record in all professional baseball. So it was quite a great start. When I got there, the first home game, we went on the road first when I got there, and I carried all my bags on the bus because the bus was pulling out when I got there, so I didn't have a chance to unpack. So I was basically homeless at the time, and went on the road trip, got back in town, and then while I was unpacking my bags, I found those size 10 red spikes. And I thought, oh, this is great, I'll take them to the field and sell them, and that'd be my bonus. So I get to the field, and on this pitching staff, there was about 11 of us, and there was 9 of them were taller than me. They're like some 6'4" to 6'8", all these giant guys with big feet. And then there was one smaller guy. He was our closer named Dave Bear, and he said, I wear size 10. He goes, I'll give you $20 for those shoes. And I said, sold. So I was going to. He goes, well, I'll have to give it to you tomorrow because I don't have $20 with me. So I said, that's no problem. I said, I'm just glad to get $20, man. So we get to the locker room that day, and the clubhouse boy meets me there, and he says, Silkwood, we don't have enough lockers for you. There's an old sink in the back that doesn't work anymore. Just throw your stuff in the sink, and underneath the sink, and we'll figure out something for you. So I'm, professional baseball, I'm throwing my stuff in the sink, underneath the sink, and the next day I get to the ballpark, and pitchers have to be there at 3:30 for a 7 o'clock game. So I get there at 3:30, and we're out running in the outfield, and I notice that Dave Bear's not out there running. And I said, where's Dave at? And they said, oh, I don't know, the manager called him in the office. So after we get done running, I'm going in, and the clubhouse boy meets me. He goes, I got news for you, Silkwood, I got you a locker. And I said, oh, really? He goes, yeah, we just released Dave Bear. I go, where is he at? Oh, he's gone. So my size 10 shoes weren't left in my locker, so I ended up getting nothing for my bonus. So that was my bonus story. So somewhere Dave Bear owes me $20 plus interest. I got a break in Gastonia. I was pitching. I only pitched in one game in Gastonia in 10 days, and I faced 5 batters, and I had 4 strikeouts, and I broke a guy's bat. And so it was a pretty good first outing. What I didn't know at the time was the Cardinals had sent a guy there to watch the starting pitcher that day was Scott Young, and they were going to have to promote somebody from Gastonia to St. Petersburg because a guy named John Fulgham, I don't know, some of you probably remember John Fulgham that pitched in the big leagues for the Cardinals. had rotator cuff surgery, had been pitching at St. Petersburg. They were going to move him to AAA. St. Pete had a couple doubleheaders coming up. They were desperate for pitching, so they were actually at Gastonia looking for another pitcher. And I threw in that game and threw real well, and the guy recommended that I go to St. Petersburg, which I didn't even know if it was a promotion or demotion or what. The guy's name was George Kissel, which most of you, if you're good Cardinal fans, you've heard of George Kissel. And he was the smartest baseball man I was ever around, aside from him recommending me go to St. Petersburg. But it started a tremendous relationship with the guy that was a super Cardinal coach. When you hear the Cardinals talk about the Cardinal way, he gets credit for a lot of that stuff, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that briefly. But he only collected 2 checks in his entire life, he said, from the United States government. He was in the service when he got out of school, and from the St. Louis Cardinals. He'd been coaching for 50-some years. He was extremely talented. They called him the professor. He was a good teacher, and so that started a relationship with him, and he gave me my first break. So I get to St. Petersburg, Florida, and I find out that that's their high A, and it actually is a promotion. And I get there the same day as a young infielder who had played outfield in college by the name of Terry Pendleton. We got there on the same day, and he became my best friend in minor league baseball. Simply, one of the reasons we got there on the same day, and we realized quickly that nobody else liked us because they didn't know who we were. And they moved Terry to play second base, and Kurt Ford had played second base. He ended up making the major leagues as an outfielder, but the Cardinals basically called him and said, "You're not going to be a second baseman anymore. We're going to put you in the outfield. We're going to put this new guy at second base." And then, after waiting for a whole half a year for John Fulgham to get rehabilitated, there was guys in the bullpen that thought they were going to be the next starting pitcher in the rotation, and then they introduced me as the new starting pitcher. So we kind of hung out together because really no one liked us besides we liked each other. But he was a good player. A lot of people don't realize he played at Fresno State. He was an outfielder. They made him a second baseman. The Cardinals did that commonly, and then because they thought Tommy Herr's knees were going to be going out on him, Tommy got his knees fixed. They moved Pendleton to third base. Half a year later, he's in the big leagues. The rest is history. He ends up having a nice career, still coaching with the Atlanta Braves, and was a past MVP, so he did real well. The guy was 5'9", built like a fire plug, and could dunk a basketball barefoot. Just a really good athlete, much better athlete than he looked. You got to remember back then the Cardinals wore powder blue uniforms, were skin tight. And you may not believe this, but that wasn't my best look. And I was quite a bit thinner then, but the uniforms were really tight, and it was tough to try to look good in those if you weren't a real good athlete. So pitchers hated them. The pitchers hated them. So played at St. Petersburg for a year. Played for a guy named Jim Riggleman, who a lot of you may remember. He managed the Chicago Cubs, managed the San Diego Padres, managed the Washington Nationals right before Davey Johnson, and as a matter of fact, he's rumored to be the next Cincinnati Reds manager. It could very well happen. Really good baseball mind. George Kissel disciple. He strong Cardinal ties, and he told this story on himself. That same year that I got there, Riggleman had only got to St. Petersburg about a week before I had. He had been a AAA coach, and the Cardinals did a reorganization halfway through the year, and they moved Nick Leyva, who's a big league coach now, has been for quite some time, moved him up to another level, maybe I think AA manager, and they made Riggleman the manager. And Riggleman was a young guy. I mean, he would have still been playing, but he had bad eyes, and that was back before LASIK surgery and all that. And he just couldn't see at night, which if you're playing baseball and you can't see at night, that's a problem. He was an infielder. And they're playing, and Riggleman's the one that told me the story, and they're playing the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, St. Petersburg. Fort Lauderdale back in those days, and probably they still do it, the Yankees would load up with all these big, strong left-handed hitters because they were trying to get those guys in the Yankee Stadium because of the short porch out in right field. We had a pitcher named Paul Cherry who was signed out of high school. He was, at that time, 19 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, left-handed, and just as dingy as you can imagine. But he had a lot of talent. Riggleman's first game managing. Cherry's the pitcher. And the Yankees had a left-handed hitter. I can't remember who it was, but his first time up, he hit a double off Cherry. Then his next time up, he hit a double off Cherry. About the 6th inning now, the game's on the line. St. Petersburg is up by 2 runs. The bases are loaded, 2 outs. Jim's got his bullpen ready to go. He's going to make his first pitching change. And he walks out to the mound to make the change, and Cherry goes, Jimmy, well, don't change me yet. I've been getting this guy out all year. I tried something different the first 2 times. It didn't work, but I can get him out. I've been getting him out all year long. And Jimmy looked at me and goes, I like that, Paul. Go get him. Before Jim actually stepped into the dugout, he heard a crack, and he turned around, and the ball sailing into the gap with a bases loaded double that put the Yankees in the lead. So Riggleman's hot. He's hot. First game he's managed. He walks out there and he goes, what do you got to say now, Paul? And Paul looked at him just as calm as could be and said, if you want to be a manager in pro baseball, you can't listen to guys like me. So Jim liked telling that story, and it's a good story. If you knew Paul Cherry, it was a lot better. I had a chance to play with a lot of guys that we played instructionally that year. I had a chance to throw to guys like Bob Garrett and Tom Pagnozzi and Tom Nieto and Mark Salas and all these guys, Randy Hunt. They all made it to the big leagues, and had a chance to live with Todd Worrell, who's a great guy. And I was a guy that was signed to play catch with all the guys that were going to make it. I mean, not everybody can make it. I was smart enough to know that those guys were a lot better than I was. I played with Vince Coleman and Andy Van Slyke and Terry Pendleton and Pat Perry, and there's just a long list of guys that I played with that were all good people. And I think when you hear the Cardinals talk about their character of their team, even back then they tried to get good people, good character people, and if you weren't, they got rid of you. There was no secret about it. I mean, I played with some guys that were pretty crazy, and they didn't last. The Cardinals got rid of them, or they ended up in jail. So highlights, I guess I played 3 years, but I played 6 seasons. I had a chance to play winter ball all 3 years. I guess my big leagues was I had a chance to play in Cartagena, Colombia, South America, and that was their big leagues over there. And got a chance to pitch in a World Series over there. And they'd sell out, and their sellouts over was about 26,000 people. But it was really interesting playing over there. Their ushers carried rifles. The wives had to sit in a caged area behind our dugout because so many of the wives had light-colored hair that the Colombian men would try to pull their hair to get souvenirs. So they put them in this cage, which was a chain link fence cage, and then they'd have a guy standing there with a rifle, looked like he was about 16 years old, and they actually were guarded in and out of the field. So there was some interesting things. They bet on virtually every pitch. So by the 5th inning, there was these huge brawls in the stands. They didn't just sell beer; they sold hard liquor, and they really had a good time. One of my regrets, because right next to our stadium was where they had the bullfights, and I always wanted to go to a bullfight, but I was afraid I'd get killed because these people were nuts, and I was an American, and I thought, as much as I'd like to see a real bullfight, I'm not sure if I could handle it. So, but it was a good experience. The travel was terrible. When I played in Little Rock, Arkansas, we played 54 days in a row, and we were looking at the calendar, and we said, man, 54 days in a row. We finally got a day off. Then we realized the reason we had a day off is because we had to go from Little Rock to El Paso, Texas, and that was a 21-minute bus ride. So they couldn't fit a game in there for that day. So I had a chance. Gary Darling, who's a real good big league umpire, Riley Vanover, a couple guys I met. They're both umpiring in the big league still. So all in all, it was a good experience. It was able to get me out of when I was done with baseball. I started into coaching. Through that coaching, I was able to complete my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and be able to get a job that actually paid. One of the things that was what's interesting is, what a lot of people don't realize is the baseball, my first salary, I was paid $600 a month, and that you had to provide your own place to stay, and you had to pay for your food when you were at home. So we always wanted to go on the road, because then you get meal money, and that was $10 a day. So those were the good days, when you get meal money. And so you didn't make any money in the minor league. Some of the guys that made money with their bonuses, I of course did not. And with that, in the interest of time, does anybody have any questions about the minor leagues according to Joe? Yes, Mark?
I feel very bad that you did not get a big signing bonus. However, I do understand that you signed a pretty lucrative baseball card contract.
I did. I forgot about that. I did. Topps Baseball Card Company did sign me to a contract in order to use my image on their baseball cards, but I didn't cash it because it was worth more just to have the contract or the check, because they paid me $5 for that, right.
And all the bubble gum you could have for life.
They gave us free bubble gum and chewing tobacco. That was one of the reasons why you saw so many guys chewing tobacco, is they'd actually give you all the chewing tobacco that you could handle. And guys were getting paid so poorly, they were going to try to get something out of the deal, so they'd load up on the chewing tobacco. I went for the bubble gum. First time I didn't realize, I never chewed tobacco before, and so I tried chewing Copenhagen. And if you don't know anything about chewing tobacco, that's not necessarily what you'd start with.
Yes.
So I ended up sick in the corner with head spins while everybody's laughing at me, you know. So I didn't do that anymore. That was one good thing about being a starting pitcher, though, is you only had to feel good once a week. That was good and bad.
Yeah, tell them about how you took your salary out of Columbia when you left.
Well, Columbia wasn't the safest place. We flew out of Bogota to come home, and they'd always paid us, and we were making a lot better money then, and they paid us in $100 bills, which was nice, except for we figured we were going to get robbed on the last day and shot. So what we did is we figured it out. We got together as a team, and we figured out what we do is we put it, a couple $100 in our pocket, but we put the rest of our money in our socks. And we actually walked out with all this cash in our socks and our shoes on, because back then you could leave your shoes on when you went to the airport. But we were supposed to be doing a non-stop flight from Bogota to Miami, and of course we're in this big plane, and we had steak and lobster was the meal. I remember that because I thought, man, this is really cool. You have and the captain came on and said that we were making an unscheduled stop in Panama. And the first thing we all thought was, well, that's it, we're hijacked, they're stealing our money, which, that's not what the case was. But yeah, we basically snuck our money out with us, so we were afraid that we were going to get robbed on the last day. And we all had a lot of money on us by that time. A lot for us. I mean, it was several $1,000s, so we were nervous about it.
Did you have Hub Kittle for?
I had Hub Kittle as a pitching coach when I was at Arkansas. He was one of the most arrogant, crotchety old men I ever met. But he'd had great luck the year before with Joaquin Andujar. Andujar loved him, but he wanted everybody to throw like Andujar, and me and Hub didn't get along too good. But he was an old grouch, basically.
Joe, did you say you played with Andy Van Slyke?
Played with Van Slyke. They were trying to convert Van Slyke into a third baseman. And he'd been an outfielder, but they had a traffic jam in the outfield with Lonnie Smith and Willie McGee and George Hendrick. And Van Slyke was coming up, and they wanted to get him, in the lineup some way, so they tried to teach him to play third base. And Andy was a great outfielder. He was a terrible third baseman because he was so nonchalant. You can't be nonchalant and play third base. But Andy wouldn't remember me. But he would remember this if you ever talked to Andy. He'd say, were you playing in an instruction league game when some bozo threw a changeup and caused you to get hit by a line drive in the chin, and he bit a hole right through his tongue, and he had to go to the emergency room and get the stitches put in his tongue? I was the pitcher in that. So he wouldn't remember me, but he'd remember that.